Well, I'm imagining some applause. We can't really hear anything in our virtual world, but congratulations to Beth Lopes and our wonderful Pericles company. I'd like to invite Beth and Julia to join me now, and also to just take a moment to thank all of you for watching that are here. We have over 100 people that came in, and so we would have a full house pretty much, if you're seeing the theater behind me, on our opening night, this strange virtual opening night. But nonetheless, we're very grateful that you're here. And perhaps, Julia, you have a question for Beth to start us off.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Beth and Maya and cast for an extraordinary presentation, condensation, distillation of what is really one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. It's kind of a dream come true to see New Swan taking on this complex and strange and mysterious and sort of endlessly giving work. I also want to welcome in the audience the many people who joined me in reading this play out loud over a period of 5 Monday evenings. We had between 25 and 40 people every night show up. And it was really a kind of almost a liturgical act to read this play together. And we were very lucky to have Maya and Randy, our Pericles and our Marina, also join us for those evenings and talk about the production and share parts of Beth's edited script. So I'm hoping that my community students will be among those who post questions in the chat so that we can hear from you about how this journey has affected you and your understanding of the Shakespearean project and of this play. I think the place where I would start, Beth, is just, with process, with how you go from, I think because this play is collaboratively written and it's textually very corrupt, it invites revision. And directors really have a lot of leeway to mend what is broken and mend it in the way that feels right to their own vision. And so I know you've lived with this play for many years. When I first met you, a decade and a half ago, you were interested in this play and Cymbeline and some of the other strange late plays. So can you just talk to us a little bit about that process of repair and what your goals were in creating a 35-minute version of this drama?
Yeah. I think one of the reasons that I like the later plays is they're so complex, that there is so much gray area and moral ambiguity. There's also so much comedy and drama. There's sort of a lot of times dramas that end happily, but not without consequence. And that's what I really love about them. There's a darkness into them, and there's a really a spirit of love being earned and fought for, and people making mistakes, which to me feels more true to life. And so that's why I really like the later plays. Like any Shakespeare play, there's a lot of mending, as you call it, to sort of bring it into our times and to make sure that it's telling the story that we feel like is the one that will resonate with our audiences and the one that will be most supportive of what we want them to feel. With this particular project, obviously it was a lot of figuring out how to put it into this 35-minute package as well. And a lot of that was Gower. And I don't know how much we need to talk about Gower, but that was Greg Unger's character. I would say in this version, probably 60% of Gower's text was Shakespeare and 40% was me, because of the necessity of what we needed Gower to do, which would not be the case in a full production.
Beautiful. It worked very well. Greg is, of course, a master, and having him narrate and take us through the gaps, which the Shakespearean Gower also does, but you've then taken that as an invitation to improve that storytelling, and that keeping us on track and focus was very effective. And then you, of course, had amazing, it seems like we have some questions here too. This is from Amira. It seems that there are more of Gower as narrator than time with the characters individually. So was it just easier to use the narrator than the dialogue, at least to keep to the short time? Do you want to talk a little bit more about how you worked with the Gower character? And
Yeah,
Amira
I
is
mean,
one of the people who read the play with me this summer.
Gower is, in this version, I mean, sometimes skipping over several scenes and filling in those gaps. There's so much more to this play than what we've seen in this video. And so I think that Gower had to be used to basically sum up the events of, I mean, honestly, probably 25 scenes that were not pictured. I mean, we only had 9 scenes from the play. So Gower was really filling in those gaps, which is a line actually he has. That's a beautiful line that we had to cut for time. So that's why we did spend so much time with the narrator. However, Gower is such an important character to me in this play that it felt right to have him as that person, and truly to have Greg playing that role, because Greg is so dear to us in the New Swan community. So that Gower in my imagined version of Pericles is telling the story and is interacting the story. So actually hops in and plays a couple key characters throughout that sends the major players on their way. So I think that he is a bit of an omnipotent figure. So I love having that time with him in this version.
That's great, Beth. I'm actually not seeing the chat responses, so I'll let you ask the question, Julia. But I have a question for you, Beth, as somebody, as a scholar of this play that you are, and someone that's directed it now a few times. And it's a beautiful work, but why do you suppose it isn't a more popular play than it is? I mean, I kind of just wonder about that in general.
You know, it always surprises me that it's not more popular in schools, because there are so many incredible characters. Because Pericles goes from place to place, a lot of times you meet these incredible people that you never see again. And so I think for schools, it's like, what a gift that you can give someone a really juicy character that has 2 great scenes and a whole identity. And then you can have that with your whole company. I mean, I feel like it really makes for a happy ensemble. And the first time, my first intro to this play was actually, we did it at my high school. And of course I wanted to be Marina or Thaisa, you know, I wanted to be a part of the family. And then I got cast as the goddess Diana and Dionysa, you know, one of the great villains of the play, and ended up having a blast playing those 2 characters. So it actually really surprises me with schools. With professional companies, I think that it's not as well known. And so you're going to have to kind of work a little harder to get people to come see it. And it's also hard. I mean, it's really hard. It spans, I think we counted 9 different locations. There are, I think, 3 shipwrecks. You sort of wonder at a certain point, Pericles, why do you keep going back on ships? There's a lot of really spectacular elements that I think are challenging. So I think the combination of it probably scaring the artists off a little bit that way, and then scaring off, well, are people going to come see it? I think that it's lesser done. However, I think when it is done and you have a great production, like that, Joe Hodge directed a production at Oregon Shakespeare Festival that was very successful, only had 8 people, I believe, in it. And it toured, I think he took it to the Guthrie, it toured all over the place. And actually Wayne T. Carr, director of Where I See Myself, was Pericles in that production.
Wonderful.
Wow, amazing. There's a question here about the black and white graphic images, and they really did add so much. We got to see an early cut without the backgrounds, And of course, you have to start with that. And then you did a lot of work post-production. Maybe you could tell us again the name of the artist and talk a little bit about what they brought to the table and how you worked with that material. And it really added so much to our experience, including the fading, from the photo to the graphic. And it was just really quite magical and yet abstract at the same time. I really thought you hit this perfect place artistically with that material.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we knew that in this format, that was going to be so much of the storytelling. And Nita Mendoza did the graphic design, and they're beautiful, beautiful images. It was so exciting that we could use our actual actors in the photos too, to try to also emphasize, who we're following in the story and who the family is. I mean, our whole team, Paul and Ezra, who did the video editing and animation and then sound respectively, added so much to the world. And we knew that it was going to be a challenge for people to follow. It probably still was. So if you're out there and you're like, I didn't quite get all that, do not feel ashamed. It is a very complex play. So we were trying to help along as best we could. So that absolutely added so much. And we were very blessed with a great team.
And it was a lot of work, right,
Oh
Beth?
my gosh, yes, it was.
And one thing about theater is that we rehearse it and we tech it, we get it ready, and it's a lot of work, obviously, but it's done. And it seems to me that when you're making films, as we're learning, we're not really film directors, by the way. We're becoming film directors, or we have been forced into doing this. And I would say this is just far superior to a normal Zoom show, which I find hard to watch. But, given the backgrounds and the music added and everything else. But there's a lot so anyway, with film, you'd get all the filming done, and then there's a lot of post-production that has to go into it. And I know that was ongoing really for the team right up until we received the film last night. Everybody,
we were working really hard. And I also want to give a huge shout out to our acting company too, because they're also doing this without any of the visuals. And, a lot of times we're setting up space and we were trying to, do it in a way where people could speak to each other, but there were some times where they couldn't. And there's, and they're hearing each other, but not speaking, looking at each other. And so, and pretending that it's raining and that it's loud. And so, yeah, I wanted to give a big shout out to our acting company as well, that are acting so much beyond just the scene. They're acting everything that they have to imagine that we put in there.
Right, which is amazing also, given that they were all acting alone. Right?
Correct.
I mean,
everyone was in different locations.
It doesn't look that way, given their acting and given the editing. But normally in a film, you get actors in the same room, and then you can have over-the-shoulder shots and all of that, which we couldn't do because of COVID. So
yeah, we're lucky, obviously, to live in a time where they can still be speaking to one another. So what you were seeing on the screen was the actual reactions to each other in these moments and how they touched each other, which was nice. And then Nita, of course, did the amazing work of making Hope and Randy and Maya look like they were together in that last image.
It's just amazing. That's just incredible. Mark wrote, why the short version? I wanted more this way. It was great. But the thing is, Mark, it's, we have found that people burn out watching plays online. And so we wanted a shorter version. And also we wanted to intrigue everyone and kind of invite our audience, as it were, to come and see what will soon be a live production.
Well, can I jump in there too and just throw out that one of the huge sacrifices of this part or this medium for the story was so much fun. There's so much fun in this play that couldn't be as much in this version because we sort of had to move the plot along. But an example is Pentapolis, which I think is really, the big comic scene of this piece, which is Simonides bizarrely playing this joke on his daughter
What's up with
and
that?
Pericles. It's so mean and it's so out of character for him too that everyone's like, what's happening? But Pentapolis is just, it's the only place that we visit in Pericles that is just so much fun. It's nothing but fun. And when Pericles washes up on shore, there's these three goofy fishermen that he meets that it's like, hey, there's this, tournament up at the castle, for the love of the princess. You should check it out. And like, it's so silly and goofy and beautiful and fun. And there's just so much of that stuff that I don't even know if we could do justice in this format. It feels like it wants to be, on stage and live.
Right. And given Beth's enthusiasm and our love of the play, I will say for the first time publicly, we're going to produce this live next season in the New Swan Theater that's right behind me here. So that's
Eli, you let the cat out of the bag.
I'm letting the cat out of the bag because you're just so excited about it.
I am.
And
one of the things. Play.
Yeah,
and Beth will be directing it.
And Beth, of course, will be directing it. So that's one of the reasons we pick plays is we figure out what we're really excited about, and then we go forward. So
I'm sorry, Eli. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I know people have questions too. There was one more thing I wanted to say, which is that one of the most beautiful things about this play, which unfortunately we couldn't really show as much in this version, is what I love about this play is that it's I think a celebration of globalism and multiculturalism, and that Pericles goes to all of these different places and really has to discover the world in order to find himself. And I think that that's one of the most fun things about this play that we will absolutely be examining in the full production, which is how different these locations are. I want them to feel like when Thaisa says, what world is this? That it feels like a different world, and that our heroes and heroines are made better because they know the world and they are exploring it and getting to know people who are different than them, and maybe even finding love and having children. And so that's one of the most important things to me about this play. And I wanted to throw that in there.
I'm glad that everyone is getting to experience your enthusiasm, excitement, and just really like a pure love of this show. It's
on Zoom, it's really in your face too, I think.
It is.
And we have some comments here from Andrea and Katie, who attended the reading group and actually have been coming to Shakespeare Weekend. I think ever since we've had a Shakespeare Weekend, I've watched Katie grow up from like a middle schooler, and now she's an undergraduate, I think, at Princeton, right, Katie? And so they comment, we spoke in the reading group about the Odyssey-like journey that Pericles undergoes. And the sense of place that this film created was incredible, with that map-like background, the directions that the actors look to mimic being in the same location, the distinction between the characters, the specificity is transportive. So I think you really achieved that
That's nice to hear.
Very beautifully. And of course, the Odyssey is narrated by, the poet. And this play is narrated by the poet Gower in Shakespeare's conception and in this production. And so that idea that that narrative art, recited poetry, is an envelope for dialogue and spoken conversation goes very, very deep into our literary tradition. And this play has that kind of deep traditionality to it.
And I think something that will show up in the full production as well is the presence of Diana, of a literal goddess who shows up in the play, who speaks in the play, and what is her relationship to Gower, and what is the world beyond the world. And so I think that will be fun to play with as well.
That is beautiful.
That's wonderful.
It's beautiful.
I have a question here from Mark for you, Beth, which is a question about the focus on the shoulders and above. And Mark says, I like to focus on the face, but wondered about more full hand and body gestures. Do you want to take that on?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this format, to me, the most important thing is people's faces and their eyes in particular, and just staying with them, and being able to experience emotionally what they're feeling. I also think that there are many moments even in this version, I tried to kind of cut around certain things that feel like they necessitate physical touch to me. And the fact that we weren't going to have that made me want a tighter frame. For instance, it's like when they're handing off the baby, we're not going to see the baby. We're not going to see them hand off. So it needs to be tight, that when the body gets brought on deck, it's like, there's just no way to me that Pericles wouldn't be with her and touching her. So how do we do that on film? We had that sort of overlay. And so that was the thinking with the shoulders, was keeping it tight for those two main reasons.
Gotcha. Maybe we have time for one more question if you have one, Julia, and then we can wrap up our evening.
Well, I mean, I'm interested in so much about this play, but what's your reading? That initial riddle. People know the play. The answer to the riddle is that the king and the daughter are committing incest together, and it goes very quickly. And Pericles kind of gets the riddle, but decides not to vocalize it, not to put it out there, and that puts him in danger. But it also, in a sense, protects him from losing his head. Well, what's your understanding? I mean, this is a play about family, as you said. What's your understanding of the role of that riddle and what happens to it over the course of the play?
It's such a strange thing, right? I mean, I think that there's so many strange things in these later plays, which is what I love digging into in rehearsal, because it's like, why is this here? And my take on the riddle is, first of all, it's not a very hard riddle, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's pretty clear, which starts me down this rabbit hole of like, is Antiochus, is this part of the power of putting it out there and like asking people to say it to it, and that is Pericles really the only one that, like, if people had the courage to say it, would he be like, oh, I'm so insulted, you're dead? And if they said, I don't know, you're dead, and that Pericles is the only one who could kind of equivocate enough to keep his head on long enough to get out of there. So it is kind of an interesting setup. And also, I think Shakespeare needed the thing that was scary enough to kind of send him off. I think there's also the element of Pericles going, oh, here's a beautiful woman and she's rich and everybody is trying to marry her. I love her and I'm going to marry her. And the kind of young foolishness of that. And then having this real connection with Thaisa and what that feels like, and a father-in-law that isn't an incestuous tyrant. But I also, Randy told me about your thinking about how he drops off. I mean, the big question mark for me about this play is, why does Pericles leave his baby at Tarsus? Why does he leave Marina there to be raised by Cleon and Dionysa? And my reading of it was that he was too traumatized by the death of Thaisa, which I think is, Julia, I don't know if you want to say what your reading was. I thought it was so interesting.
Well, I just feel like he's scared of incest. I mean, I'm not the first one to say this, but he very rapidly allows Thaisa to be thrown overboard, even though she is still actually alive. And then he does not want to become a father. So there's a kind of ongoing, like, he's gradually trying out what it is like to be in a relationship, but he's not really able to commit fully to either of these relationships until the end. And so it has to be healed with this kind of penitential journey. And
I think what was so interesting to me about that, Julia, about that, because that had never occurred to me before. However, I think that the first scene being what it is makes you think, well, why is that? And I do think that there is something, especially in Shakespeare's later plays, that the dangers of not having a mother around. Mm-hmm. And whether that's, he's worried about incest, or it's just this traumatized single man, what kind of life can I give her? As opposed to this couple that I saved their kingdom, and Dionysus like, we'll do anything for you. She will have a better life there. And so I think all of that is a part of that. And I think we see time and time again in Shakespeare's plays, when mothers are out of the picture and what happens. As You Like It is an amazing example of that, of no mothers and things go, so I think that there is something in there for sure, about what can I bring to this child.
Right. Oh, you can see we could talk about this play for hours and hours. It's a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Beth, and Julia, for helping out with everything. Julia was really an inspiration for this particular project. We were thinking, well, what can we do that's going to be of value during this pandemic summer? We're sure we're coming back next summer. We're not even going to cross our fingers. We're just saying we're headed in that direction. But if you want to watch this film again and tell your friends and anyone that might be interested, I think it's a pretty terrific introduction to the play, I think, and we'll be streaming it there in perpetuity.